Welcome to the Wednesday evening Bible study for the Bridgewood Church of Christ for May 20th, 2020. That's a lot of 20s. We hope that you're doing well, that you're staying healthy and safe. We don't have any specific announcements or updates for this video. Our members should check their email for specific updates on health matters for the congregation. We try to keep those matters private. If you're not receiving the email for some reason, we do have some folks who it's getting filtered off to spam, so check in your spam folder. Make sure and add this email address, you'll see below, beacon@bridgewoodchurch.org, to your contacts list. And that usually helps, especially if you're on Yahoo or SW Bell or ATT. We have a specific problem. Those are all one big group. We have issues with those email addresses. But check that email for those updates. You can also call the church office 9 to 3 every day, weekday, 817-451-2382, or email me directly, John, Jon, at bridgewoodchurch.org. Our devotional this evening is going to come from the text that is part of our Together We Grow curriculum. John 12, if you have your Bibles handy. John 12, Jesus being anointed by Mary. And we're going to be using the John text. Of course, this is also in Matthew 26, I believe, and Mark 14 as well. Ed did a great job covering this text, and so I'm just going to draw out one point from verse 3 of John chapter 12 for our thoughts tonight. You'll notice there that they are in Bethany, and we'll come back and talk about that in a second. We're actually going to read the whole text, about 8 verses in a minute. But at one point, as the fragrance is being wiped onto Jesus' feet, John notes, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the oil. One of the things that's interesting as you read through the New Testament, details like this are not always included. It's a lot of practical, personal kind of details, but a detail like this, John, most likely in the latter part of his life, writing a detail, a memory that as he's recording it or having it recorded is so vivid. The smell of this nard, or spikenard, your version might say, the smell of this nard filling the room, I imagine it transported him right back. I know watching our Appian Media videos that we're watching on Wednesday night, last Wednesday with my family, Brienne was talking about some of those places in the Bible lands that she had been to with her parents. And she was talking about the smells of some of these places. Some of them for centuries of incense that have been burned there. Others less pleasant smells. But that was one of her triggers. And I think we all have scents like that we remember. I know every time I smell that Axe body spray, I'm immediately transported back to camp and these boys that have the Axe bombs or Axe wars in the cabins, and it's enough just to knock you right over. So I just read that and I see John being transported back to this memory as he's recording his gospel. But let's read together John chapter 12, verses 1 through 8, make a few observations, and then send you off to class. John 12, then 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany. And if this works out well, I'm going to put a map up right here. In Bethany, about 2 miles outside of Jerusalem. And so it says where Lazarus was, who had been dead, whom he had raised from the dead. And then also there's another name that's associated with this passage in Mark, Simon the leper, the house of Simon the leper, connecting these folks all together, most likely as relatives. Verse 2, there they made him a supper, and Martha served, but Lazarus was one of those who sat at the table with him, with Jesus. Then Mary took a pound of very costly oil of spikenard, anointed the feet of Jesus, and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the oil. Of course, Matthew and Mark both record this as being put on his head. And so I imagine this is a significant quantity of this oil, this fragrance. And so it was enough to cover him from head to toe, is what I imagine. And very costly. this costing, as we'll see here, about the average worker's year's salary. So let's keep reading here. One of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, who would betray him, said, "Why was his fragrant oil not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor?" This he said not that he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief and had the money box, and he used to take what was put in it. But Jesus said, "Let her alone. She has kept this for the day of my burial. For the poor you have with you always, but me you do not have always." And then it continues on from there. Okay? For our purposes, of course, Ed talked about Judas and this statement in his Sunday sermon. If you haven't watched it yet, it's a good thing to go back and watch. But for our purposes tonight, the thought of this very expensive gift that had been saved, Mary knowing that Jesus was going to die, knowing he was his Messiah, knowing these messianic prophecies, she was able to see this. She was prepared for it, and she knew what was coming. And so she was taking this opportunity. And what's interesting is some will take and look at this and say, well, why didn't she sell that oil and give it to the poor? And we recognize that there are multiple things that we're supposed to do with our resources, that we're supposed to do with the money that God gives us, the time that God gives us. Helping the poor, helping those who need our help is part of that. But there are other things for the cause of Christ that we have to work on as well. And we recognize that each one of us, as part of the body, some being hands, some being feet, some being eyes, some being a mouthpiece, and every other function that the body has, that all of us have a specific role to play. So, that is your thought for this devotional period as we head into our Bible classes. The fact that each one of us has a role to play, but also that we want to remember those things that make the Bible so real to us. And John providing this account of the fragrance filling the room, to me, is so vivid, especially in comparison to some of the other writings in the New Testament. Our class offerings tonight, again, we have a video that's for kids and a video that's for adults. Here in the last 15 seconds of this video, I'll put the adult video right over here. We'll put the kid video right over here. It'll pop up right above my hands here in a little while. But for the adult video, we're going to go to Nazareth. And we're actually going to see a carpenter who's working in the same style as a first century carpenter would have worked. And so we're going to see some of that perspective and learn what a first century synagogue might have looked like, what that carpenter might have looked like, and really give some context to so many of the things that we read about in the life of Christ. And for the kids, their video is going to be looking at how God always keeps his word. How God always keeps his word. The plan is to have our Zoom meeting at 7:40 again tonight. So we hope you'll join us on that for discussion of our grown-up video. But we look forward to continuing together in our study, our learning, and our growth with these two videos.